Hello everyone. Today's episode of Tasteful Understated Nerdrage is a very special episode. In it, I'll be reviewing Dark Souls, a game made by From Software and released in fall of 2011. As is customary for me, I'll spend the first part of the video rambling on and on about unrelated stuff before finally getting around to actually saying anything about the game itself. But before I do that, I'm going to take a short break to have an existential crisis about the following question. What is the point of video games? Why do we even need them? Why not read a book or watch a movie or listen to music? Why am I not making a video about Moby Dick right now, or Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, or Citizen Kane or something? As we all know, video games are silly, shallow things that only nerds like. Why even bother? I can answer that question with a single word. Gesamtkunstwerk. So now that that's cleared up, let's talk about Dark Souls. You begin the game by waking up in a cell in a mysterious asylum. You know, now that I think about it, maybe I should go back and explain what this word means and why it's important. It was used most famously by Richard Wagner. Wagner was an opera composer and amateur anti-Semite who lived and worked in 19th century Germany. He may have been wrong about the Jews, but he was right about opera. He said that opera was not only about the music, but also about the sets, the costumes, the story, the performances, and everything that went into its production. All of these things together combined to form the Gesamtkunstwerk, or total work of art. If all of the components that make up the opera work in harmony with each other, the end result will be more than the sum of its parts, and removing or replacing any of these parts will diminish the whole. For an example of how this works in a game, let's look at one of the most iconic video games of all time, Super Mario Bros. The plot of Super Mario Bros. Is wall-to-wall silliness. You play as a plumber who's trying to rescue a princess from a spiky turtle monster. Everything you see is colorful, bizarre, and whimsical. This atmosphere is reinforced by the primary gameplay mechanic, jumping. The bulk of Mario's time is spent jumping on things, jumping off of things, or jumping between things. All of this jumping is satisfying and fun. It creates the impression of escaping from the boundaries of reality while simultaneously being tethered to them. An impression reinforced by the absurd but internally consistent logic of the game world. In a world like this, of course eating a mushroom would make you twice as big. Of course eating a flower would make you able to throw fireballs. Everything you see, hear, and do in the game adds up to a cohesive whole, and the only way to experience this whole is to play it. Words alone can't describe it, because words are only one medium, and this is a multimedia experience. It's an interactive multimedia experience. It's a Gesamtkunstwerk. It's a goddamn video game, and there's a reason people like it. So now, can we talk about Dark Souls? Yes. The reason I went through that whole song and dance is that explaining what makes Dark Souls good can't be done by listing its various qualities piecemeal. Instead, I want to try and illustrate how each individual component harmonizes with the others to produce a cohesive whole. The most common thing you hear about the game is how hard it is, how it's full of enemies that will kill you in one hit, how it doesn't hold your hand the way most games do, and how you'll die over and over and over and over and over again while you're playing it. If you're like me, you probably thought this was a strange selling point for a game to have. Who would want to play something like that? Who would voluntarily seek out a frustrating, profanity-shouting, controller-throwing experience to eat up their limited free time? First, know that the game's difficulty is exaggerated by most people. It is harder than most games, yes, but not punishingly so. At least not in most cases. Fucking basilisks. Second, the difficulty serves a thematic purpose. The world of Dark Souls is not cruel. Instead, I would describe it as indifferent. Whenever you die, and you will die, the camera usually lingers on your corpse for a few seconds afterwards, long enough to see whatever enemy killed you lose interest and go back to whatever they were doing before. The world of Dark Souls bears you no malice. You don't merit its malice. You're not important enough. This is a departure from most games, where the player is presumed to be the most important person around. Not here. Here, you're just another doomed soul trying to stay alive for as long as possible in a dying world.
Well, what do we have here? You must be a new arrival. Let me guess. Fate of the undead, right? Well, you're not the first. But there's no salvation here. You'd have done better to rot in the undead asylum. But too late now.
The dialogue and visuals reinforce the gameplay. The stark and simple art style makes the game unsettling in a way that demons and gargoyles and thunderstorms could never be. The mood that pervades everything else in the game is reflected in the story, or maybe it would be better to call it the mythology. The opening cinematics shows us the stakes of our task.
Thus began the Age of Fire. But soon the flames will fade, and only dark will remain. Even now, there are only embers, and man sees not light, but only endless nights. And amongst the living are seen carriers of the accursed dark side.
The fires of the world are going out, and this matters because they're the game's only safe place. They're where you can rest and recover, and they're the only thing in the entire world that's there to accommodate the player. It's no coincidence that the item used to strengthen and sustain them is called humanity, and I doubt that the shape of that item is a coincidence either. Playing the game gives the impression of fighting for the spark of human agency against the majesty and indifference of nature. And every element in it, from presentation to story to gameplay, serves to reinforce that impression. This is very rare. There are lots of games with great stories, stories which would probably work as well or nearly as well if you swapped out one gameplay style for another. And there are lots of games with great visuals and gameplay, which would probably work as well or nearly as well if you swapped out their story with another one. But it's rare to have everything in a game work towards one unified purpose. In fact, if you remove Mario and Zelda and their sequels and other games that use their templates, I've only ever played 5. Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, Portal and Portal 2, and Dark Souls. Games where removing or adjusting any of their individual elements would result in a diminishment of the whole. This isn't to say that these are the 5 best games ever made, or that games that don't fit into this category are somehow deficient. My intent here is not to rank things according to quality, but to explore the unique possibilities of the medium. It's the final element in this equation, gameplay, that's the trickiest. Thanks to movies, we have more than a century of accumulated know-how when it comes to combining audio, visual, and story elements. But combining gameplay into this adds a whole new dimension, and as a craft, it's still relatively young, which makes it that much more impressive when someone pulls it off. Dark Souls is not for everyone, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. For some people, the difficulty is just too off-putting. A video game is a big time investment, and isn't something you should feel like you have to slog through because you have a moral obligation to. The only thing you're morally obligated to do is keep watching my videos. Here are a bunch of possible subjects for future ones. I've set aside a team of monkeys with typewriters to start pounding away about each and every one of these topics, but your input will help me decide which of them to do and in what order. Keep an eye on this channel for updates. MrBtongue out.